The train station buzzed with activity as the afternoon chill settled in. I glanced at the scheduled board and then at my watch, my nerves on edge. Thomas, my fiancé, stood beside me, his face a mask of anxiety. Today was important. It was the first time I would meet his family, and I was keen to make a good impression. Thomas's mother, Nora, lived 3 hours away from the nearest train station in a suburban apartment. We had hired a car to take us there, hoping for a smooth journey. As the vehicle approached the apartment complex, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of apprehension. The car rolled to a stop, and I saw Nora waiting outside. She was an imposing figure with a commanding presence. Her dark hair was neatly styled, and she wore a tailored coat that matched her stern demeanor. Thomas and I stepped out of the car, and he nervously introduced me. "Kelly, this is my mother, Nora," Thomas said, his voice betraying his anxiety. "Nice to meet you, Nora," I said, extending my hand with a warm smile. Her handshake was firm, but her eyes remained distant. "So, this is Kelly," she said, her tone flat. "Thomas, are you really going to marry her?" The question hit me like a punch. I tried to maintain my composure. "I'm Kelly Wright. It's nice to meet you. Thomas and I are planning to get married." Nora raised an eyebrow, her gaze assessing me with an almost clinical detachment. "Thomas, I was hoping you'd bring home someone more suitable. Someone who could support you and not flaunt her professional success like a badge of honor." I was taken aback. "I have no intention of leaving my job. My career is an important part of who I am." Nora's expression didn't change. "And do you think that's how a wife should be? Independent and ambitious?" "Thomas needs someone who will be there for him, not someone who prioritizes her career over family." Thomas intervened, trying to smooth things over. "Mom, Kelly's job is important to her. It's part of why I love her." Nora's expression softened slightly, but she remained skeptical. "Well, if that's the case, I suppose there's nothing more to say. But remember, even if you're busy with your careers, don't forget your responsibilities in marriage." As we settled into the car for the drive back, I could feel the weight of her words pressing down on me. Thomas was unusually quiet, and I wondered if we would ever bridge the gap between his family's expectations and our own plans for the future. Our new life together began in a modest 3-room apartment close to Thomas's pub. It was a small space, but it had a cozy charm that made it feel like home. However, our domestic life soon revealed cracks in our relationship. Thomas's schedule at the pub kept him busy, often leaving him exhausted by the time he came home. This resulted in him sleeping through the mornings and leaving me to handle the majority of household chores. I didn't mind doing my share, but it became clear that Thomas was not contributing in any meaningful way. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I arrived home to find Thomas still asleep. I made dinner, tidied up, and then attempted to wake him. "Thomas, can you please take out the trash and clean the kitchen?" "I've had a long day," I asked. He groaned and turned over. "I'm tired. Can't you handle it tonight?" "This isn't fair. I work just as hard as you do." "We need to share the responsibilities," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Thomas sat up, clearly annoyed. "Well, you wanted to keep your job. If you're so busy, why didn't you think about that before we got married?" His words cut deep. I felt a surge of frustration and helplessness. I had hoped that once we were married, we would be able to support each other better. Instead, it seemed like the problems were only escalating. The months passed, and the tension in our home remained. I was constantly juggling my job and the household chores, while Thomas seemed to retreat into his own world. When we were invited to visit Nora again, I hoped it would be an opportunity to mend fences, but I was also apprehensive. The drive to Nora's place was filled with silence. Thomas's mood was somber, and I could sense his unease. As we arrived, Nora greeted us with her usual mix of formality and scrutiny. "Welcome back, Kelly and Thomas," she said, her eyes sharp. "It's good to see you both." "Thank you for having us," I said, trying to sound positive. "It's always a pleasure to visit." The evening started off with small talk, but as the night progressed, Nora's focus shifted increasingly to me. She asked about my work, my plans for the future, and my role in Thomas's life. "I hear you've been doing quite well in your career," Nora remarked, her tone not entirely complimentary. "But, a successful career isn't everything. A marriage requires more than just financial stability." I felt a pang of embarrassment. I believe in balancing my career with my personal life. I'm committed to making our marriage work, but I also value my career. Nora glanced at Thomas with a disapproving look. "I hope you're supporting her, Thomas. It's not easy to balance a demanding career with a marriage." Thomas shrugged. "We're managing." The rest of the evening was fraught with uncomfortable silence. Nora's comments left me feeling disheartened. I couldn't shake the feeling that no matter what I did, I would always be judged harshly by Thomas's family. The ongoing strain in our marriage took its toll on me. I felt overwhelmed by the constant pressure to balance work and home life while dealing with Thomas's lack of support. The arguments grew more frequent, and I began to question whether our relationship could survive. One particularly stressful day, after another argument with Thomas about his lack of involvement at home, I decided to take a day off work to reflect on my situation. I needed some time to think about my future and whether this relationship was worth the struggle. As I sat alone in our apartment, I felt a profound sense of exhaustion. I loved Thomas, but our marriage seemed to be a constant battleground. I realized that I had been trying to meet everyone's expectations, Thomas's, his mother's, and even my own, without truly addressing the core issues in our relationship. When Thomas came home that evening, we had another argument. This time, I felt like I was at my breaking point. "Thomas, I can't keep doing this. I'm exhausted from working all day and then coming home to handle everything. It's not fair to me," I said, my voice shaking with frustration. Thomas looked at me with a mix of frustration and guilt. "I don't know what you want from me. I thought you wanted to be independent. You never wanted to change your job, and now you're complaining about doing all the work at home." "I'm not complaining about doing the work. I'm complaining about doing it all alone," I said. "We're supposed to be partners. I thought we'd be supporting each other." The argument marked a turning point in our relationship. I realized that if we wanted to salvage our marriage, we needed to address our issues head-on. I suggested we attend couples counseling to work through our problems. To my surprise, Thomas agreed. We began attending counseling sessions where we explored our expectations, communication styles, and the underlying issues that were causing tension between us. The process was challenging, but it was also enlightening. In counseling, we learned to appreciate each other's perspectives. Thomas began to take more responsibility around the house, and I started to feel more supported. We also addressed the impact of Nora's influence on our relationship and learned to set boundaries. One of the most important lessons we learned was to focus on our own needs and goals rather than trying to meet everyone's expectations. We began to prioritize our relationship and work on building a foundation that was strong and supportive. As time went on, Thomas and I continued to grow as a couple. We faced challenges, but we faced them together. Our relationship became more balanced, and we found a rhythm that worked for both of us. We learned to navigate the dynamics with Nora more effectively. Our visits became less frequent, and when we did see her, we approached it with a sense of maturity and understanding. We set boundaries with her and focused on our own needs. Our marriage was not perfect, but it was ours. We had worked hard to find a compromise and build a life together that respected both our ambitions and our commitment to each other. We learned that true success in marriage was not about meeting everyone's expectations, but about creating a partnership that worked for both of us. Thomas and I continued to support each other's dreams while making time for the small, everyday moments that made our marriage special. We had learned that a successful relationship required effort, understanding, and a willingness to grow together. Looking back on our journey, I realized that the challenges we faced had made us stronger. We had overcome obstacles and built a foundation for a lasting partnership. Through it all, I discovered that true success in marriage was not about perfection, but about working together to create a life filled with love and mutual respect.